Oh, and you thought 2020 was over, didn't you? Not so fast. Now, why did this terrorist siege of the U.S. Capitol happen today? Well, today's terrorist siege, and that's what it was, this was a terrorist event. It was not spontaneous. It didn't just come out of nowhere. In fact, they actually laid siege to a number of state houses across the country. Kansas, Ohio, Minnesota, California, even in Georgia. You had the Secretary of State for Georgia. He had to be evacuated. And these mass sieges by these terrorists across the country happened at almost the exact same time. What that means is this was coordinated. And this is history repeating itself. People forget that the night that Abraham Lincoln was shot, the insurrectionists, they actually went after most of his cabinet. They went after the vice president, went after the Secretary of State Seward and a number of others. They were attempting to decapitate the U.S. government in one fell swoop that night. This is history repeating itself. It is not merely meant to be an attack on them. It's also meant to let them know, hey, we're going to make this a regular feature of the elections. This is white supremacy attempting to usher in the apartheid state. The white supremacists see this as a preview of how they intend to hold on to their power. And it's going to be a matter of, we don't care about elections. We don't care about anything. What we care about is you understand that it's going to go our way, or we're going to be showing up with guns and overrunning the place. This wasn't just a DC phenomenon that happened today. They did this mess nationwide. And you know what I say about that? I say this is good. Thank God for Donald Trump, because this unrepentant white supremacist piece of trash in the White House, he's been showing the entire world exactly what the United States is. You can't go lecturing China about human rights when you're killing black folks in the streets. You can't go lecturing the rest of the world about the behavior of their citizens when this is what your own dominant society has been doing. Oh, this is all those suburbanites and all of those Joe Plumbers and all of those, I'm a real American. Yeah, apparently this is how real Americans act. The U.S. has always been putting up a phony front and everybody's known it. But what happened was nobody had really put on display how false America's pathetic little charade has been until now. And this is good. People need to see this. The whole world needs to see this. And if Donald Trump had not been elected president, you would have had Hillary Clinton in there, and you would have had people sitting on their hands and biting their tongues, and otherwise you would have had the same old fraud continuing. Now the false veneer has been torn away, and people can see that the United States is exactly what black people have been saying all along. This country is precisely the cesspool of racism and white supremacy that we said that it was. This doesn't happen if you don't have an unrepentant white supremacist in the White House, because everybody can pretend that so-and-so was taken out of context or what have you. No, no, no. This is exactly what people need to see. No hitting the reset button on this one. This has been long gestating and building to this point, long before Donald Trump came to power. This is the predictable result of decades of coddling and pampering white supremacists. There is a segment of the population who is never told that they're wrong, they are never refused anything, they are never punished, and they are never held to account. So of course it's only natural that this segment of the population would inevitably believe that nothing that they do is wrong, and that nobody was going to tell them what they can and cannot have, even if it's illegal, even if they know that they're lying. You sit there and you pretend as if these liars actually have a point, which is what the white media does. They play along with these guys' lies. So instead of checking them, instead of saying these guys need to be punished and put in a cage, they need to be locked up for the rest of their lives. Instead, well, you see, this is because of affirmative action, you see. And, well, you know, there's really no difference between the Klan and the Black Panthers, you see. All of these decades of false equivalences, all of these decades of trying to compare a bunch of anti-black racists to the good guys, comparing the white supremacists to their victims. They have created a milieu of moral relativism. This is what the white media has done. And this is the predictable, toxic overflow, like a toilet that's been stopped up. A fitting analogy because these white supremacists and the white media are all full of crap. Now, just yesterday, you had the Proud Boys in Washington, D.C. This was one of those cases where you see a dress rehearsal for this. The Proud Boys testing the D.C. police to see if the D.C. police were going to arrest them, and they didn't. Sure, they sprayed them with some pepper spray and pushed them back, but the thing about it is when they saw no mass arrest, in other words, these guys were not going to be hemmed up. Nobody was actually going to stop them. They would put up token resistance, but then again, you look at the D.C. police, you look at the composition of the D.C. police, it looks a lot like the alt-right. It looks a lot like Atomwaffen. It looks a lot like the membership of the Proud Boys now, doesn't it? I couldn't tell the difference. Both the D.C. police and the Proud Boys wear yellow and black. I couldn't tell the difference. When you look at the ethnic makeup of the D.C. police and the Proud Boys, you couldn't tell the difference. These white supremacist terrorists, these guys have been building to this. Yesterday was just a dress rehearsal. What the Proud Boys did was a dress rehearsal. And they saw, yep, our guys in the D.C. police, they understand to stand aside. We're all on the same page. This was freaking orchestrated. These terrorists were not afraid that the police would stop them. Why would they? Many of their members are in the police. From Charlottesville up until today, in every instance where the white supremacists have staged one of their attacks, the police have always taken the side of, supported, and protected these white supremacist gangs. And as we've seen in many cases, the police themselves have been members of these white supremacist terror groups. The Proud Boys, the alt-right, Atomwaffen, the Three Percenters, and any other gang of scum you want to name, they all brag about having friends in law enforcement. Sheriff Dar Leaf up in Michigan, when Governor Whitmer had that kidnapping threat against her, that Sheriff Dar Leaf, he decided to go in front of the cameras and say, well, citizens have the right to kidnap public officials if they so choose. And why would he, a government official, somebody who everybody knows, why would this guy who's supposed to have an oath to uphold the law, why would this guy say something like that? Why would he feel bold enough to say something like that, to advocate for breaking the law? Why would he do that? It's because they don't fear any reprisals. Why should they? None of them were punished for the Charlottesville massacre. None of them ever gets punished. The State Attorney General of Michigan didn't do anything to Sheriff Dar Leaf, and neither has any of the members of the Michigan legislature. They never do anything against these white supremacists. They know that even as grave as their offenses are, nothing's going to happen to them because the principle of preserving white immunity from law is more important than their alleged most revered institutions. You see, the reason that this happened today is because for 500 years, this country has played footsie with these white supremacists. This country has tried to protect and mollycoddle and pamper the white supremacists because this country sees those white supremacists as being their army. I've been telling you about the regular and the irregular forces of white supremacy. So when you see these militias, that's your irregular forces. When you see clowns like that Kyle Rittenhouse character, that's your irregular forces. The Proud Boys, your irregular forces. They should have been stopped over 150 years ago, but they weren't. Because you had both the North and the South who made their devil's bargain that, hey, we may have had a little bit of a dust up, but let's not forget it's the white supremacists versus these black people. Let's not forget whose side we're really on and who we're really against. And this country has been living a lie. This nation is a house of hypocrisy, constantly lying and claiming that black people are the big threat when the white supremacists have always been the only threat to this country. I consider it to be poetic justice. The same Congress that refused to do anything about these white supremacists. In 2006, the Bush administration's Justice Department released their report saying that law enforcement had been shot through and overrun by white supremacists. Well, naturally, the Bush administration, that was as far as their efforts were going to go. Hey, we're bragging about how many of these law enforcement apparatuses we've taken over. That was them doing a victory lap. When the Democrats got control of the House of Representatives during the Bush years, they didn't do a damn thing about it. When Obama took office, he had the House, the Senate, and the White House, didn't do a damn thing about it. In fact, they decided under Obama to embolden the white supremacists. After Tamir Rice and so many other black people were murdered by the police, the thugs in blue and their alt-right white supremacist auxiliaries, they wanted to see what the response would be from the Obama administration. They were testing the waters. They wanted to go ahead and test the boundaries and see what happened. If we go ahead and act out, if we go ahead and show that the police are boldly going to protect the white supremacists and are going to take the white supremacist side, will the Obama administration do anything about us? Well, what's the consequences going to be? Let's test them and see what happens. Would Obama punish them? Would he so much as even challenge them? Of course not. Instead, that spineless coward, that duplicitous piece of trash, rather than take on the police, Obama decided to take their side. He wrote some asinine blue alert executive order, which did absolutely nothing because it did nothing to supersede existing law. It was just basically a vow of allegiance with the thugs in blue. It was meant to embolden the police and the white supremacist terrorists who they protect, support, and in many cases are members of. Obama encouraged the very white supremacist lawlessness that we've seen today, because it's not that today is the first time it's happened. It's always been going on. The only difference is now it's happening in Capitol Hill, and the very kind of behavior that they did nothing about when those white supremacists were in front of the Michigan State House. That was the time to round those bastards up then. But no, whenever it comes to some white supremacist, they can have a gun anywhere, anytime they want. The laws don't apply to them. That's the entire point. Always making sure, well, you see, the reason we can't prosecute them is, well, reasons, you see. We're white and we say so. Obama pulled the same stunt thinking that he was cute, thinking it wouldn't go any farther than that. And the thugs in blue and the white supremacists who they support, they saw this weakness. So you had the police seeing that Obama would try to appease them rather than punish them. And seeing that nothing was going to be done against them, the police and their white supremacist auxiliaries became even more brazen. They took pictures with their white supremacist allies. The New York Times was forced to report about it, but the black media was already all over this years earlier. But you got the Philadelphia police and the NYPD and other police and sheriff's departments gladly taking pictures with these white supremacist street gangs. And even going so far as to wear the white supremacist symbols on their police uniforms. They're making it very clear, no, we're not undercover white supremacists. We're in your face with this. I mean, the thugs in blue weren't even trying to hide their white supremacist affiliation. Why should they? Obama made it clear that he was far more interested in appeasing the police in the pathetic hopes that he could get some police union votes, and he was perfectly willing to have black people murdered in the streets if that was the cost of making sure that he could brag and say, I successfully handed the White House over to another Democrat. At least more than 8 years of Democratic rule. This hasn't happened since FDR, and that's my legacy. You got to secure my legacy. Not only did Obama lose whatever goodwill he thought he had, but his legacy also went down the toilet too. And those police unions, they looked at him and said, yeah, we ain't got to respect you. You're an idiot. For years, the black grassroots had been telling the Nancy Pelosi's and telling the Ayanna Presleys and telling the Alexandria Ocasio horsefaces and the rest of the assorted garbage on Capitol Hill, telling them your top priority is supposed to be punishing these white supremacists. Instead, what was their top priority? We need to legalize the Latinos so that we can finally drown out that black vote. All these troubles that the black community keeps causing us politically, if we had a demographic counter lever, we could just relegate them to irrelevance, or at the very least, we would make it where they wouldn't have anywhere near as much influence as they have over elections. That was their top priority. Oh, transgender bathrooms. I didn't hear anybody talking about transgender bathrooms today. Oh, well, we need to be concerned about climate change. You might want to be more concerned about regime change at the barrel of a gun, because that's what they were looking at today. Many, if not most of those white supremacist terrorists who overran the Capitol building today were armed. And the very same Congress who refused to do anything about these white supremacists, well, the white supremacists showed up on Capitol Hill today to do something about them. Oh yeah, they're little attack dogs who they figure were only going to attack black people. Black folks have been putting our foot down this last year, so now they've gone looking for softer targets. They've known for weeks that this was coming. They've known for weeks that these white supremacist marauders were going to descend on Washington, D.C. They knew the date. They've known about it for weeks. Now, all it took was just a few hours, and they brought out the National Guard because they thought that some black people might spray paint some Supreme Court building or some federal office. They brought out the National Guard for that. A phalanx of white supremacist terrorists threatened to descend on the Capitol, and they do nothing. What does that tell you? What it means is, even under the threat of being exterminated, you got the white supremacists still getting on code with each other, making it clear, oh, well, that principle of white immunity from law, that is sacrosanct. They're still looking at us because that's the only reason that you would not punish these guys, because you're looking and going, well, we need as many numbers as possible, so if and when the time comes that we got to deal with the Negras getting too powerful, we still need numbers. We need numbers. So the same members of Congress who didn't have a problem with the Confederate flag flying, you didn't see Lindsey Graham or the rest of those neo-Confederates being happy today that the Confederate flag was flying inside the Capitol building. There was one of the white supremacists who brought the Confederate flag in there. I didn't see anyone saying, well, this is about Southern values. Why? There's nothing violent about the Confederate flag. Yeah, the Confederate flag just brings sedition, treason, and violence everywhere it goes, but they weren't. Apparently, all those good old boys from Mississippi and Alabama and Florida, they didn't seem to be very comforted by the sight of the Confederate flag inside the Capitol building today. For some strange reason, they weren't comforted by that sight. Nope, there was no talk about states' rights. No talk about the Confederate flag being no different than any other flag and just a symbol of history. Those congressmen, they almost became history today. And they brought this on themselves. When you refuse to fight terrorists, you make yourself into a target of the terrorists. And these white supremacist gangs, these marauders, these terrorists, they are fighting for their position of being untouchable as they see it. 2020's uprisings has shown some real cracks in the ability of white supremacy to hold on to its dominance. They know that they're going to lose it at some point. But as far as they're concerned, it's going to be all hands on deck to keep that day at bay for as long as possible. They understand that there's an aggressive push by black people to have our power by any means, and they're making it clear they will destroy this country if they cannot maintain their privileged status. And we saw today the police made it clear that they're standing with the white supremacists. Hell, they were the ones who opened up the doggone barricades so the white supremacists could get access to the Capitol building. The police were out there taking selfies with the white supremacists. These guys have illegally breached a alleged police cordon. They are illegally inside the Capitol building, none of them being searched for weapons. You know that these guys are a violent gang and they brag about their guns and their willingness to kill, and here the cops are taking selfies with them, making nice with them. And you got that ex-stripper thought calling herself the mayor. She ain't gonna bust a grape. The goal now is, well, we don't want to really arrest anybody. We just like it if they would just go home. Ain't this just like what Terry McAuliffe did when the alt-right massacre in Charlottesville took place? No mass arrest of the alt-right. Instead, he's going, you guys could just go home. You're not welcome here. Nobody ever looks and says, we're going to mass arrest these bastards and we're going to put these guys on trial and make examples out of them. We're going to be building new prisons just to house all these white supremacists. Instead, it's a matter of, if we can just get these guys to go home, and we'll blame Donald Trump. We're going to blame Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. And you don't see Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, the so-called top cop. You don't see either of them saying, we are making a pledge that this unprecedented attack on the nation's sovereignty is going to be punished. If Trump doesn't punish them, then that's okay. As soon as we take power, we're going to be going back and getting all their faces, finding out their identities and rounding them up. Hell, these guys are bragging. I mean, you see them on freaking Twitter. You have this one idiot who looked like a refugee from the Elks Lodge. He's the so-called QAnon shaman. Though shaman of what, I don't know. But as it turns out, this idiot had been in Arizona a few months back. He was spotted there too. It was posted on Twitter. He was spotted in Arizona at a Black Lives Matters rally. This guy did not just come out of nowhere. These people did not just happen to be there. These guys go from place to place to place. That's how you know there's some money behind these guys, making sure that they get around. And by the way, everywhere he goes, he takes a spear with him. That's a doggone lethal weapon. Well, it's a lethal weapon in the hands of a black person, but everybody else has the right to bear arms, especially if you're white. If you're black, then it's a lethal weapon. You should be arrested just because you got it. But what, you think people don't know who the hell this guy is? And of course, you had the now, I think, very well-known picture of one of these white supremacist terrorists who went into Nancy Pelosi's office. Well, this ought to be comforting to her. I mean, she did everything that she could to ethnically purge San Francisco of black people. And now some of the folks who I'm sure that she would be much more happy having in her fine city, some of them decided to pay her office an unannounced visit. One of these clowns, he went in there, put his boots up on her doggone desk. And then he, just to show people he ain't scared, he took a picture of himself outside the Capitol with one of Nancy Pelosi's correspondence, one of her letters. He's holding it in his hand, just to show people, hey, I was there. It's going to be very easy to find out who these guys are, but don't expect much to be done about them because at the end of the day, as far as white supremacy is concerned, it's only a crime if black people do it. If you got a bunch of white supremacists who are going on a rampage, well, the Capitol building becomes nothing more than just bricks and mortar. It's lives that matter, don't you know? Do we really wreck someone's life because they did something foolish? Expect to hear that crap. What happened today, people have been comparing it to the Civil War. This is actually more serious than the Civil War because the Confederate Army didn't make it as far as these white supremacist terrorists did today. They didn't get as close as these white supremacist terrorists did. These bastards were literally inside the Capitol building going through these senators' and congressmen's offices. By the way, no one concerned about what kind of information these bastards might have uncovered while they were there. No threats to national security, I see. When something of this nature happens, you don't want it to become habit-forming, do you? But when you look back at the Civil War, you see what happened. Robert Lee was not executed. Instead, what happened was the guy basically was told, you can go ahead and be a professor at Princeton. As Abraham Lincoln said, we're moving on. With malice toward none, he said. With malice toward none? Yeah, just because you cause an insurrection costing hundreds of thousands of American lives, that's no reason to hold a grudge, no reason to have to punish you or anything. I mean, for God's sake, is it that serious? This country has always given a wink and a nod to white supremacist violence. And that's because at the end of the day, the white supremacists who are out there killing people, these are the status quo's attack dogs. And after all, you don't want the attack dogs to get domesticated now, do you? They'll be hesitant when it comes time to deal with the niggers. If black people call themselves getting a little bit too bold in their assertion of their rights, when black people start feeling like, well, we have the right to wield power like anyone else, and we definitely have the right to live our lives without being harmed, well, someone's got to show them, no, that's not a right that black people have. You cannot mass arrest or mass punish these white supremacist gangs because, after all, under white supremacy, the only threat is black people. Sure, the white left and the white right may squabble over who's going to hold the whip in the society, but they both understand that the whip they're fighting over will never be used on either of them. That whip was created and meant to be used against black people. So you'll see the white left and the white right fighting, but they understand what they're fighting over is not to see which one of them is going to be eradicated or done away with or what have you. It's just a matter of who's going to be the one who gets to tell the other one, now you have to do what I say as we go ahead and abuse these Negroes. So no matter how savage the violence from either side of the spectrum, it will always be minimized and downplayed and ultimately whitewashed. Don't be stupid enough to think that the white media is going to go on a crusade to try to figure out who these white supremacist terrorists today are. Don't expect for them to go on a Russia hoax style jihad saying we got to find out who these guys are, every single one of them. Don't be expecting anyone to be saying we need to plaster their names, every single one of them, their names and faces. We need to find out who they are. Don't expect to see any legislation geared towards specifically dealing with this white supremacist terrorist attack. Instead, it's going to be treated as, well, some of the times they get a little bit rowdy, and this happens to be a question of tone and civility in American politics. Why, whatever happened to civility in politics? And people used to be so nice. This is not going to be treated as the unprecedented terrorist attack that it truly is. And the reason why is the enemy in society are black people. You cannot go talking about the status quo in the society, the dominant society, as being part of the problem. You cannot sit here and say we are going to rein you in from the very behavior that we need you to commit in order for white supremacy to stay in place. If and when black people begin forcing the system to bend the knee, both the white left and the white right are going to be counting on the very thugs you saw today to try to stop us. And this time, the police won't be MIA when that occurs. Oh, the cops will be right out there with them, just like they were this summer. Today's terrorist attack in D.C. occurred for the exact same reason that all of these mass shootings occur, for the exact same reason that all of these serial killings occur, for the exact same reason that all of these terrorist bombings occur in this country. Because for a certain segment, for the dominant society in this country, there is an ironclad guarantee, a societal permission that is given to certain individuals to do whatever the hell they want. Violence is socially permitted, politically permitted. There's always going to be excuses made for it. It's always treated as an isolated incident. Oh, well, we got to tell you where this mass shooter or where this serial killer or where this mad bomber, we got to show you where he went to work. And, oh, we want you to understand he's just like you. And we're not going to mention his criminal history. That's beside the point. We got to make it clear to you. This is a human being, mind you. The Las Vegas shooter murdered 60 people. And the white media talked about him like he was one of the victims. Telling you about his job, the neighbors never had any problems out of him, his dreams and aspirations. Meanwhile, Trayvon Martin was murdered, and the white media talked about him like he was the one who killed somebody. And that's deliberate. White supremacy is in a state of perpetual war against us, on a perpetual war footing against us, in a constant state of war readiness against us. Oh, they'll try to pretend as if there's something like peacetime, but that's not the case at all. Because as far as white supremacy is concerned, when it comes to black people, they gotta always be ready to cycle from pretending, this kind of long detente, this phony detente, to cycling right up into hostilities again. They gotta be ready to do so. So what happens is we look and see some mass killing, some white supremacists commit some predictable, ghastly act of mass bloodletting, and we look and go, oh man, this must be horrible in the eyes of the dominant society. Instead, the white supremacists are looking and going, well, hell, that's not even a drop in the bucket. 60 people dead? What the hell is that supposed to mean? That's not going to change anything. Oh, this time you had about a dozen children killed. Not going to change anything. And the reason why is 60 people getting killed in an outdoor concert, a bunch of people being gunned down in a movie theater, over 160 people died in the Oklahoma City bombing, about a half dozen of them were children. As far as white supremacy is concerned, hey, to maintain that absolute requisite principle of white immunity from law, we're not about to punish these white supremacists. Yeah, Timothy McVeigh was running around with militias. It was obvious what the hell he is and who the hell he's running around with. We're not going to do anything. Hey, Dylan Roof murders 9 black people. We're going to take him to Burger King. And every white supremacist saw that. And what they also saw, that there was no punishment for the police who did that. Nobody was fired, nobody punished, nobody put in jail. Nothing was done about it. And they were looking and going, yeah, that's right. You kill a lot of black folk, and what's going to happen is they're going to treat you with kid gloves. So it gets reinforced over and over and over and over again, so long as the person carrying out the terrorist attack or the ghastly act of violence happens to be a white supremacist or otherwise comes from the dominant society. Well, nothing's going to be done about it. It's not as bad as all that. So when you spend hundreds of years teaching people that if they do something, it's not wrong, or at the very least, it's not as bad as all that, then what happens is they can do anything. They can decide to blow up a federal building with half a dozen children inside. They can decide that they're going to shoot up a school. They can decide that they are going to try to topple the government repeatedly. Why shouldn't they? Nothing's going to be done about it. Oh yeah, it was a lot of steps on the road that led us to today. But none of it was accidental. And the very individuals who the white media would try to portray as being the victims of today's terrorist attack, the U.S. Congress, they're the ones who enabled and emboldened these terrorists. They have the ability to stop them, but they're not going to. Even after this, what's going to happen is we got to find a way to downplay it, minimize it. We got to find a way to contain it. We're not going to wage war on our foot soldiers. They've already made their decision on that. They aren't going to wage war on these foot soldiers. They're depending on them. We just got to get these guys to back up. You don't want the dog biting the hand that feeds it. No one in the media is going to be saying that when the incoming Biden-Harris administration takes office, that their first act should be to put together a task force to locate, arrest, and to try all of these terrorists. That's not going to be the story. They're going to let this be a 5-minute story. Nobody's going to be saying, Kamala Harris, you used to be a prosecutor. Yeah, and I locked up a lot of black people. Well, now you got to lock up some white ones. I can't do that. You think I'm going to do something that only targets white people? No. That's what you're going to be hearing from Kamala Harris. There's going to be a lot of phony, baloney, insincere rhetoric about, oh, the nation must heal, and once Donald Trump's gone, all this will be behind us. That's what you're going to be hearing instead. Keep in mind, there's a lot of Biden Republicans out there who the Democrats are looking to sway. White supremacy never takes its eye off the ball. And the ball is, what are we going to do about this growing and burgeoning threat of black empowerment? That is always the nation's top priority. After 9/11, there was a poll taken among a lot of Americans, most of them white to be sure, about what they considered to be the biggest threat to the country. This after 9/11, 3,000 Americans killed in a single day in a terrorist attack. And when they were asked what the biggest threat was, they said black people. You can look that one up, by the way. So no, they're not taking their eye off the ball. Black people may be content to play the game of, oh, well, surely they will wise up now and understand that we are not the biggest threat facing the country. They're like, no, forget about it. If black people have empowerment, they're going to be exercising power over white people. And that's going to be the pyramid turned upside down. And this is the very freedom that we fought for, the freedom to be able to steamroll black people, and that we have a position of super citizens. We are first-class citizens. Black people are third or fourth class. We cannot have that threatened. That's what the American Revolution was about. That's what the Civil War was about. That's what World Wars I and II were about. White supremacy having taken over most of the world, they were fighting to see which one of them would be barking out the orders. The Germans were determined, we will bark out the orders. And you had the Anglo-American partnership saying, no, we're going to bark out the orders. And what happened was one group of thugs arguing with the other, and we can tell which group of thugs won the argument. Then you had the Cold War, which was a group of Eastern white supremacists fighting their Western counterparts to see which one of them was going to be in charge, and we see which one won the argument. And you also see that these guys went on having business with each other and ain't skipping a beat. Nobody lost more lives in World War II than the Russians, but you have swastikas being flown in Russia today. Why? Because the Russians are concerned about non-white immigration. The United States prided itself on, oh, we crushed the Nazis, and yet you got white supremacists running around with swastikas, not even wannabe swastikas or pseudo swastikas, but the actual swastikas themselves here in the United States, and you got people making excuses for it and calling them very fine people. Oh, don't tell me that the white left, especially the Democrats, were too concerned about Donald Trump praising the Charlottesville terrorists. If they were, they would have done something about it. They didn't. If they were concerned, they would have run on a platform of, we are going to punish these white supremacists, put us in power and we're going to punish them. Why is it that none of the Democrats, not Bernie Sanders, not Raphael Warnock, none of them ever makes punishing the white supremacists into a plank of their political platform? None of them ever points out we must have a war on white supremacy. Nobody's going to be talking about a war on white supremacy after this. None of them will be. Just like they didn't after Charlottesville, there is no act of white supremacist terrorism that will ever be so great that this government is ever going to be saying we need to have a war on white supremacy. Nobody is ever going to be saying that. Joe Biden sure as hell won't be saying it. White supremacy is a system of goodies, giveaways, and guarantees that are handed to those classified as white by virtue of their birth. It's a bunch of freebies that are given to them. That's the glue that holds white supremacy together, that there is a system in place of tangible and psychic benefits. Tangibles meaning that they're getting material benefits, money, things they can hold, put in their bank account, pass down. Psychic benefits, they have a white media that psychologically masturbates them, a white government that pats them on the head and tells them that they are exceptional and all the rest of it. They have a media that praises them just because. So if you're white, you get to feel as if you're better than. And this is the glue that holds white supremacy together. They feel like they're getting something out of it. And here black people come along saying, hey, that pendulum's going to be swinging the other way real soon. And all of this American, read white exceptionalism is going to go away. And they're looking and going, hell no, it won't. There's a lot of phony indignation from those on the left today, simply trying to figure out if they can use this terrorist attack as a means to augment and magnify their own position. But make no mistake, none of them is going to be saying we're going to be starting to round these white supremacist terrorists up, and everyone who emboldened them, we're going to make sure that they do the hardest time there is. We're going to be writing laws so we can go after them. Nobody's going to be saying we're going to be writing laws. Nobody's going to be running on a platform of make me U.S. attorney, make me the DA, make me attorney general of the state, and I'm going to go after these white supremacists who staged this attack on democracy today. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's going to be promising to punish the white supremacists. Nobody at all. You're not going to have any police out there going, back the badge. Today, this was no respect for the law. Blue lives matter. Yeah, because blue lives matters has always been nothing more than a pathetic white supremacist slogan meant to give them something to say. It was always something meant to be thrown out there so you can cover for the killings of black people at the hands of the police. That's all Blue Lives Matters ever was. You're not seeing the police being angry about this because many of those individuals who were storming the Capitol today were in fact law enforcement. A lot of those guys were either past or even current law enforcement. So, of course, you're not going to be seeing the police saying today was a horrible day for law enforcement in America. This was an attack on law enforcement. This was an attack on the law. This demoralizes police when we're trying to do our job. The Congress is carrying out their lawful functions and we got attacked just because of our job. Nobody's going to be saying, hey, you attacked police today. You got to go to jail for life. Nobody's going to be doing that. Of course, we know that had these terrorists been black people merely demonstrating, it would have been exactly the opposite. We've seen all year what would happen. They got the flashbang grenades. They got the tear gas bombs. They bring in military helicopters. They bring in whole lines, just an army of cops and National Guard, everybody out there to make sure you guys don't get any ideas that you're going to have power in this society. And then if any of the black folks decided that maybe there was going to be a civil disturbance, well, there would be arrests. They would be going after them weeks and months later, like they did in Baltimore and Ferguson. The courts and the cops were going after those Baltimore uprisers months afterwards, longer than that even. In fact, a lot of those anti-police violence protesters, a number of them, as you know, wound up dead. And, well, we're supposed to believe that these guys either committed suicide or they were killed at the hands of persons unknown. Now, these white supremacist terrorists don't expect to see anywhere near that kind of fervor in order to punish them. Nobody's going to be going on a jihad about that. Thing to remember here, this is not going to be the last that you're going to be seeing of this. Oh, there's going to be other such incidents like this, and the reason why is white supremacy is trying to figure out how does it control its attack dogs and control the individuals who it's conditioned to think that nothing they do is wrong. So when they're dead wrong, they're just, well, I don't care, give me what I want anyway. How do you deal with that without actually dealing with it? Oh, there's not going to be any convenient distractions coming along. No black people, no OJ trial that you can use, no black people who you can use as a shiny object to distract the white supremacists from being at one another's throats. No, it was not just one thing that got us to this point today. It was a lot of things. Like a white media and its auxiliaries that have been cheerleading for this crap. You got these right-wing nuts like Stephen Chowderhead and Tim Fool, among others, Joe Rogan's running buddy. These guys have been spouting this white supremacist gibberish for the longest time. They've been making excuses for this white supremacist violence, always claiming, oh, well, such and such was a joke. Yeah, they always say that until the violence starts. Then it's, well, what about so-and-so? Always what about? Always what about? You cannot compare anything that happened today to anything that's taken place since the Civil War. You cannot compare Black Lives Matters to this. Black Lives Matters protested peacefully outside the White House. Black Lives Matters, when the police said you got to leave, the Black Lives Matters did so. In fact, the police attacked them. Black Lives Matters never stormed the Capitol building, never stormed any federal buildings. Damn sure didn't decide that they were going to overrun the police just so they can get into the doggone Senate chambers. You see, the protests that took place this summer were the very epitome of law and order. It's the white supremacists who we've seen today. This is the lawlessness. The killing of black people in the streets and no punishment for it, that's lawlessness. Allowing white supremacist terrorist groups to be standing in front of your state building and you don't do a damn thing about it. You don't prosecute anyone. You don't arrest anyone. You don't punish anyone. That's lawlessness. And so because you didn't do anything about it when it was a small problem, now they've decided, well, hell, we'll just topple the whole damn nation then. Why should we just stick to one individual state? Let's just bring the whole damn country down. So don't worry, it won't be long before, starting with the so-called right, because there's no real difference between the two, but the white right is going to begin the process of making excuses. They've already been doing it already. They're going to start the steady drumbeat of, well, this wasn't as bad as all that, and there was only a few people, and oh, it was a peaceful demonstration. Yeah, they brought assault rifles to a peaceful demonstration. It just got a little bit out of hand. Oh, but the country will recover. And we need to be focusing on all of these black people. What about South Chicago? One person died today. What about South Chicago? Expect that to start, and expect the so-called white left and their black flunkies to let them get away with it. Nobody is going to say that all business in the Congress comes to a halt until we deal with these guys. Nobody's going to be doing that. 16-year-old young woman died today. She was one of those insurrectionists, it seems. And that being the case, what we don't see is the white media asking any questions. Since she was clearly mobbed up with this terrorist group, nobody's saying, hey, let's find out if she's got any sort of criminal record. Let's find out if she's got a disciplinary record in school. Does she drop out? Who's she been hanging out with? Does she do drugs? Nobody's digging for any dirt under her fingernails, same way that nobody's been digging for any dirt under Kyle Rittenhouse's fingernails. Black media were the ones who had to find the video of Kyle Rittenhouse beating up one of his female classmates in July, just a few weeks before he carried out his murderous rampage. Black media has to do this stuff. The white media understands the purpose that it serves under white supremacy. Sure, you may have a lot of white folks who have their problems with the white media from time to time. And oh, if they would say this, why don't you say that? But ultimately they understand, well, these guys, we know what team they're on. We just wish that they would be a little more fervent in representing this side or the other. But ultimately they know that the white media is never going to be against team white supremacy. That they know. I'll have more to say about this in tomorrow's Thursday evening address. But for now, well, isn't it interesting to see that the mob wasn't Black Lives Matters after all? It wasn't the anti-police protesters. The mob is the same group who it's always been. The group who has been mollycoddled and pampered and been catered to for 500 years. And now these chickens have come home to roost in the U.S. Capitol. They have come to displace the very individuals who empowered them and looked the other way and made excuses for them and refused to punish them. So now they've turned on them like a pack of rabid dogs. Gee, who could have possibly seen this coming?